I didn't think much of it the first time he fell asleep in my bed. He'd had a few drinks, said he didn't feel like walking back to his dorm. It wasn't weird. Guys crash in each other's rooms all the time in college, right? But the third time? That's when something shifted. My roommate Adam wasn't just some random classmate. We'd been living together since the start of sophomore year, and we were polar opposites in all the usual ways. He was loud, confident, constantly surrounded by people. The kind of guy who'd call you bro 5 times in one sentence and somehow pull it off. Me? I kept to myself. Headphones on, books open, tucked away in corners of the library. We got along because we didn't step on each other's toes. And yeah, okay, he was hot. Objectively. Tall, strong jaw, that permanent scruff that made him look older than he was. But it wasn't like I let myself think about it too much. He had a girlfriend. A long-distance one, which somehow made her feel less real, more like a footnote in a story I was never supposed to be part of. But this story didn't start in bed. It started in the kitchen. I was frying eggs in my boxers. It was a Saturday, and I figured Adam had crashed at one of his buddies' places after a party the night before. But then I heard his door creak open. He walked out wearing only a pair of mesh shorts, rubbing the back of his neck like he'd just woken up from the dead. "You always cook shirtless?" he asked, voice still heavy with sleep. I blinked. "You always walk around half naked?" He grinned and grabbed a glass of water. Touché. That should have been the end of it. Another morning, another dumb exchange. But as he stood next to me, staring into the sizzling pan like it held the secrets of the universe, something strange happened. He didn't move. Just stayed there, close, too close. "You okay?" I asked, glancing at him from the corner of my eye. He nodded slowly. "Didn't sleep great." I wanted to ask why, but before I could, he mumbled, "Mind if I chill in your room later?" It wasn't a big deal. Not really. We'd gamed in there before, watched dumb YouTube clips on my TV, but something about the way he asked it this time. His voice, low, careful, stuck with me. That night, we both ended up in my room, sprawled across the bed, watching some conspiracy docuseries he claimed was just background noise. At some point, I felt his foot brush against mine under the blanket. Neither of us moved. I thought maybe I imagined it, until he shifted again and let his leg rest against mine. No excuse, no comment, just contact. I didn't know what to say or do, so I stayed still, frozen. Then he sighed. "I hate sleeping alone lately." I turned my head. "Since when?" Adam looked at the ceiling, jaw clenched. "Since she stopped calling." That's when it hit me. His girlfriend? They hadn't been talking. I hadn't seen her name light up his phone in weeks. "Sorry, man," I said. He didn't respond, just turned on his side, facing me, eyes half-lidded. "You don't have to be," he murmured. That night, he stayed in my bed, again, and when I woke up, his hand was on my waist. The first thing I noticed was how still the room was. Not silent, exactly, the hum of the fan, the occasional creak of old pipes, but still, like the air itself was holding its breath. And then there was his hand. Not just resting on me like before. No, this time it was deliberate. The way his fingers curled just slightly at my waist, like he was testing the edge of something. I could feel the heat of his skin through the thin fabric of my shirt. And I froze. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I told myself I was imagining it, that he shifted in his sleep and landed there by accident. That if I waited long enough, he'd roll over, mutter something, and the whole moment would dissolve into awkward silence in the morning. But then I felt his thumb move, just a slow, almost imperceptible drag across my side. A line of fire traced in casual pressure. My chest tightened. I kept my eyes closed, heart pounding so loud I swore he could hear it. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. If I said something, what would I even say? "Hey man, thanks for groping me in your sleep." But then his breath hit the back of my neck, soft, warm, steady, too close. I knew he was awake. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. He shifted slightly again, just enough that the whole front of his body was pressed against my back. And that's when I felt it. The unmistakable pressure of him. Hard, real, pressed right against me through thin layers of fabric. No mistaking it. No pretending it didn't mean something. Still, I said nothing. Didn't flinch. Didn't give him a reason to stop. Maybe I wanted to know where this was going. Maybe I needed to know. He didn't say a word, but I felt his breathing change. Quicker now, shallower. His fingers moved again, this time gliding along the hem of my t-shirt like he was considering whether to keep going. Then, finally, he whispered, "You awake?" His voice was rough, quiet, like it hurt him to ask. I nodded. Barely. Just enough. Another pause. Then his hand slid under the shirt, palm warm against my bare skin. My body went rigid for a second, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. "I don't know why I'm doing this," he murmured, so close I could feel his lips brushing the back of my neck. I don't know. I can't sleep when I'm not near you." It was the kind of line that didn't make sense, that felt made up, something out of a dream or a fever fantasy. But it was also the kind of line you don't forget. My voice came out barely a whisper. Then, "Don't move." The second I said it, I felt him exhale, like I had just released something inside him he'd been holding too tight. He leaned in, forehead pressing gently to the back of my shoulder. His arm tightened around me, pulling me in closer, and we stayed like that for what felt like forever. Neither of us said another word, but everything had already changed. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. For a few seconds, I thought I might have dreamed the whole thing. The touch, the whisper, the way he held me. It all felt too fragile, too out of place in the daylight. But then I saw the dent in the pillow beside mine, still warm, and the faint imprint of his body in the sheets. I sat up slowly, trying to piece together what last night actually was. My door was open, and I could hear the low sound of music coming from the kitchen. Something mellow. Acoustic, not his usual workout playlist. I found him leaning against the counter, shirtless, sipping coffee like nothing happened. No tension in his shoulders, no trace of the night before. He looked at me and nodded, like we were still just roommates sharing space. "You sleep okay?" he asked, like it was just another morning. I searched his face for something. Guilt, confusion, acknowledgement. But there was nothing. Just the easy calm he always wore like armor. "Yeah," I said, voice scratchy. "You?" He shrugged. "Better than usual." That was it. No mention of what we did, no awkward apologies, no smugness. Just silence hanging between the clink of mugs and the hum of the fridge. I wanted to ask what it meant. If he remembered. If he regretted it. But I couldn't find the words. I was afraid of what he might say. Or worse, what he wouldn't. So I said nothing. And we went about our day like we didn't sleep wrapped around each other just hours before. The rest of the week was strange. He didn't sleep in my bed again. He barely even came into my room. We'd cross paths, at the fridge, in the hallway, on the couch, watching a movie. But it was all surface level. Safe. Careful. He was trying to pretend it didn't happen. And maybe I was too. But then, late Friday night, just as I was settling into bed, I heard it. The soft knock. 3 slow taps on my door. I opened it to find Adam standing there, hoodie on, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes flicking up to meet mine for only a second. "I can't sleep," he said simply. I stepped aside, and he walked in without waiting for permission. He didn't go to the chair, didn't pretend like he was just here to hang out. He crawled straight into my bed. I turned off the light, heart thudding in my chest, and slid in beside him. Neither of us spoke. This time his arm wrapped around me immediately. Not tentative, not testing. Like he already knew I wouldn't stop him. I don't remember falling asleep. Just the warmth of his body behind mine, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the feeling of being held like I was something breakable. When I woke up, sunlight was cutting through the blinds, casting soft lines across the wall. He was still asleep, arms slung over my waist, lips slightly parted. Peaceful. And too close. I slipped out of bed as gently as I could, heart pounding, unsure if I was scared of waking him up or scared that he might not care if I did. I didn't go far. just into the kitchen, needing distance and caffeine and space to think. A few minutes later, I heard the floorboards creak. He appeared in the doorway, hair messy, hoodie sleeves pulled down over his hands. He didn't look at me right away. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "Morning," he echoed, voice lower than usual. He reached for the coffee, poured himself a cup, and then leaned against the counter in silence. For a long minute, neither of us said anything. Then, finally, he spoke. "I'm still with her." I froze. My stomach dropped. He wasn't defensive about it. His voice wasn't angry. It was conflicted. "I figured," I said, because what else was I supposed to say? Adam ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath. "It's not good. Hasn't been for a while. I haven't even seen her since winter break." "Then why?" I started, but stopped myself. He looked at me for the first time then, really looked. "I don't know," he said. "I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that when I'm in your bed, I sleep. When I'm next to you, I feel like I can actually breathe." That hit me harder than I expected. I didn't reply. Couldn't. My throat felt too tight. He stepped closer, setting his mug down carefully on the counter. "I'm not trying to mess with your head," he said quietly. I don't know what this is." I stared down at my hands, at the chipped paint on my mug, wishing it could give me some kind of answer. "I don't either," I finally whispered. He didn't say anything, just took one more step closer, enough that I could feel the heat from his body again, and then he reached out and touched my wrist. Barely, just a light brush of skin on skin, but I felt it everywhere. "I don't want to stop," he said, voice low. "Then don't," I murmured. His eyes locked on mine. He didn't smile, didn't say anything cheesy or make a move. He just stepped in, slowly, and pulled me into a hug. Tight, quiet, still, and it felt like a decision. For a few days, things were quiet. Not awkward exactly, but dialed down. We still hung out, still ate dinner on the couch, still traded sarcastic comments like nothing had changed. But there was a space between us now. Unspoken, thick, with everything we didn't say out loud. Then one night, while we were both pretending to watch a movie, Adam suddenly blurted out, "We should stop." I didn't even look away from the screen. "Yeah," I said. He nodded, like he was relieved. "It's just complicated." "I know." A beat passed. He added, "She's flying out next month. I should at least figure things out before anything else happens." "That's fair." We didn't talk about it again after that. At least not with words. But the silence between us said everything. The way he kept glancing over at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his knee would bump mine on the couch and neither of us would move. The way he lingered in the kitchen when I was making coffee, standing just a little too close. We were holding back. Technically. But it felt like we were one shallow breath away from going right back to where we were. And then came the night it all unraveled. It was late. I'd stayed up working on a project for class. He was already in bed. Or so I thought. I was brushing my teeth when I heard the soft knock on my door. Not even a full knock. Just a subtle tap. Like he didn't want to wake me, just wanted to see if I was still up. I opened it to find him standing there in sweatpants and that gray hoodie he always wore when he couldn't sleep. "Hey," he said. "You awake?" Obviously. He stepped inside. This time, he didn't hesitate. He crossed the room, reached for the blanket on my bed, and slid underneath like he'd never left. Like we hadn't said we'd stop. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. I turned off the light and laid beside him, my heart already racing. He didn't touch me right away. We lay there for a few long minutes, the tension pressing down like a weighted blanket. Then, quietly, deliberately, he slid his hand into mine. And I knew the whole "we should stop" thing, that was never gonna stick. It didn't take long after that night for the line between us to vanish completely. He stopped knocking. Some nights he'd come in and fall asleep beside me without a word. Other times he'd lie there quietly, then slowly reach for me. My hand, my side, my face, like he was asking a question without speaking. And every time, I answered by not pulling away. It was secret, quiet, intimate in a way I didn't know how to define. Nothing ever got loud. There was no big confession, no kissing under rain-soaked streetlights, just touches that lingered, stares that burned too long, a tension thick enough to live in. Until one day, everything snapped. It was a Saturday afternoon. One of his friends, Mason, came by to borrow something, and I overheard their conversation from the kitchen. "You still talking to Rachel?" Mason asked casually. Adam's answer came too quick. "Yeah, of course, she's flying out next month." Something in me twisted. When Mason left, I didn't say anything. I just cleaned the same counter 3 times and avoided his eyes. He must have felt it, because that night, when he came to my room like always, I didn't open the door. The next morning, we didn't speak. It went on like that for 2 days. Polite avoidance, stilted small talk, the occasional glance across the apartment that said more than we ever managed out loud. On the 3rd night, he finally cornered me in the hallway. "What's your deal?" he asked, leaning against the wall like he hadn't wrecked me a dozen times over in silence. "You tell me." I shot back. "You're still with her, right?" His jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." "It is," I said. "You either want this or you don't." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, flatly, "You don't mean anything." I laughed bitterly. "Cool." But the second I turned away, he grabbed my arm, and before I could speak, he kissed me. It wasn't soft. It was hard, hungry, desperate. Like he was trying to erase the words he'd just said. And I let him, because I knew he was lying. His lips said I meant nothing, but his hands, gripping my waist, pulling me close, told me everything I needed to know. After that night, there was no pretending. We didn't talk about what we were doing, didn't define it, but we stopped pretending it wasn't happening. He slept in my bed more than his own. We woke up tangled together like it was the most natural thing in the world. We shared toothbrushes, ate cereal out of the same bowl sometimes. He started borrowing my hoodies, and I stopped asking for them back. But we still didn't talk about it. That was the unspoken rule, don't name it, and maybe it won't collapse. Until one night, out of nowhere, he ruined it. We were lying on my bed after a long day, him with his head on my chest, my fingers tracing lazy circles on his back. He shifted suddenly and said, "You know we're not, like a thing, right?" The words dropped like a brick between us. I didn't respond. I didn't trust my voice. He sat up a little. I don't want you to catch feelings." I stared at the ceiling, jaw clenched. Too late. He flinched like I'd hit him. "I didn't mean—" "Doesn't matter," I said, standing up. "It's all good." I left the room before I could say something worse. I didn't see him for the rest of the night. When I came back from a walk, his door was shut. Lights off. Silent. The next day, he was gone. No note. No text. Just gone. He came back late. I heard the door click quietly, and a few minutes later, a knock at my door. This time I didn't open it. He knocked again. Softer. Finally, I heard him say, "I didn't mean it like that." I opened the door. He was standing there in that same gray hoodie, eyes bloodshot. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered. "I've never felt like this before. It scares the shit out of me." I stepped back, letting him in. He walked past me and just broke. He didn't try to talk, didn't try to explain. He sat on the edge of my bed, hands shaking, shoulders tense. I moved beside him and placed a hand on his back. And just like that, he cried. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. I held him as he leaned into me, silent tears soaking through my t-shirt. It felt like something was breaking open inside him. Finally, when he could speak, all he said was, "I don't want to lose you." And I believed him. After that night, everything felt different. He didn't run from me anymore, didn't act like it was some mistake we could sweep under the rug. But he still hadn't said what we were. Weeks went by in this strange limbo between real and not real. Some nights he'd hold me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. Other days he'd pull away completely, mumbling something about needing space, disappearing for hours. It was like watching him fight a war no one else could see. Then, one Friday afternoon, his phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't mean to look. But her name lit up the screen. Rachel. He stared at it for a long time before silencing it. Didn't answer, didn't explain, just turned off his phone and went to his room. That night, he didn't come to mine. The next morning, I found him sitting on the fire escape outside the living room, hoodie up, cigarette burning between his fingers. He barely smoked, only when something was heavy on his mind. "She wants to come visit," he said, eyes fixed on the skyline. I waited. "And you?" He took a drag, exhaled slow. "I told her not to." I didn't know what to say. Relief and confusion twisted together in my chest. He turned toward me, finally, and for once, he didn't look conflicted. He looked tired. Honest. "I told her it's over," he said quietly, "because I can't keep pretending I'm okay with living a lie." My breath caught. "And this?" His gaze didn't waver. "This isn't a lie." He put the cigarette out and reached for my hand. His fingers were cold, mine were shaking. "Doesn't mean I've got it all figured out," he said. "I'm still scared. I don't know what this makes me, or what happens next. But I know I sleep better with you. I laugh more. I don't feel like I'm faking it all the time. And right now, that's enough for me." I wanted to say something back, something that would make the moment bigger, cleaner, easier to understand. But all that came out was, "Okay." He smiled then, small but real. "Okay." "Yeah," I said, threading my fingers through his. "Okay." The city hummed below us. Wind tugged at his hoodie. The sun was barely up, painting the windows gold. For the first time, we didn't need to hide. We didn't need to define it or explain it. He was there, next to me. No distance, no pretense, no lies. And somehow, that was enough. At least for now. It's been half a year since that morning, on the fire escape. Sometimes it feels like forever ago. Sometimes it still feels like yesterday. Adam and I didn't move in together officially. We already were, but what changed was the silence between us. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't pretending. It was comfort. We didn't make a big announcement. There was no coming out party or social media post. We just lived quietly, the way people do when they're still figuring it out but not ashamed anymore. He started going to therapy after breaking up with Rachel. Said he needed to understand why he'd spent so long running from himself. I didn't push. I just listened. He'd come home from those sessions looking drained but lighter. One night he said, "It's weird, you know, realizing you were the problem and the answer the whole time." I didn't know what to say, so I kissed him instead. That seemed to work. We've settled into our rhythm. Mornings are slow, messy, filled with coffee cups and half-finished conversations. He still leaves his socks everywhere. I still steal his hoodies. We argue too, about groceries, about who left the dishes, about whether it's too soon to tell my mom. Real stuff, honest stuff. But the thing is, every fight ends the same way, with us curled up in the same bed, a quiet apology whispered against skin. He hasn't labeled himself yet. "I don't know if I ever will," he said one night as we lay watching some dumb cooking show. "I just know who I want to wake up next to. And that's fine by me." Love doesn't always need a headline. Sometimes, when I wake up and he's still asleep, arm flowing across my chest, hair sticking out everywhere, I think about how impossible this used to feel. How I spent months convincing myself I was imagining it, and now it's just normal, beautifully, ridiculously normal. He still gets nervous when we hold hands in public. Not always, but enough. It's progress. I remind him that it's okay, that no one gets it perfect the first time. He nods, squeezes my hand tighter, and keeps walking. The other day, out of nowhere, he said, "You know I love you, right?" I looked up from my laptop, half smiling. "You're aware you've never actually said that before, right?" He grinned, a little sheepish. Yeah, guess it was time. Then he went back to his cereal like he hadn't just dropped the biggest sentence of our lives. That's him. No drama, no grand gestures, just truth wrapped in quiet moments. If you told me a year ago that my straight roommate would become the person I'd fall asleep next to every night, I'd have laughed in your face. But life's funny that way. You don't always plan the best parts. Sometimes they just show up at your door, wearing a hoodie and asking if they can sleep in your bed. And now, every time I see that dent on his side of the mattress, the one that started all of this, I can't help but smile, because it's not just where he slept. It's where everything finally began.